Welcome to the Content Repurposer podcast, where we help authors, content creators, and thought leaders find ways to repurpose their books or other pieces of content into their marketing material. So today we have Katie Sadler, who has over 15 years of working with authors on marketing, first through her work in-house at Penguin, Random House, HarperCollins, and Hachette. And now, through her author marketing business, she now helps authors come up with sustainable marketing plans for themselves. So thank you so much for being on my podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know you have a lot of experience within HarperCollins and all the places that you worked with previously. What made you want to start your own business or start your own career path?
Well, I think so I've always had this desire to be freelance and to work for myself. I think I'm quite a strong introvert, so the office environment was not like my ideal way of working with people. It was always really busy. There's some like open plan offices, there's so many people around. I remember when I was at HarperCollins, we did like a Myers-Briggs test. I was very much on the introvert side, and like we got together as a team. We all had to draw our ideal offices, and it was like all the introverts were like alone, with the door closed. Like I basically had like my own little private area, and then there was like a kitchen where I could go and chat to people, because I'm not that much of an introvert that I never want to see anybody. But also it was very much like I just want to work in my own space. So I had kind of that going on, and then I found after so I've got two small kids who are 7 and 9, and I found after going back after my first maternity leave that it was really hard to manage getting back for nursery pickup, where they charge you, it was like something like £5 a minute if you're late. And, getting there really early in the morning and just not feeling like I was spending that much time with my baby, which was really hard. I had some other things happening. So it was kind of like it was like like one thing on top of another, which eventually led to me leaving I left my HarperCollins job to move to Hachette to do a maternity contract. And I was like, right, at the end of this maternity contract, I'm either going to be going all in, looking for promotion, marketing director, like next step, or I'm going to actually leave and go self-employed, because that's what I really wanted to do. And that's what I did. So, yeah.
I can relate, and I think that's a lot of people deal with, where there's so many different complications that come with working a 9-to-5 job that there's just a lot more freedom when it comes to freelancing.
Yeah.
So when you started to have your own career, what type of work did you offer?
So I launched like a group. It was kind of a group training called A Life of Words. It was essentially just, I think it was like 4 weekly emails, which took you through like different segments of marketing. And then I would kind of work with the authors over email. And then I actually like mentored those authors for a year. So I check in on them every month for a year after we stopped working, after we kind of worked through those 4 weeks. And it was a really good start. But I think what I realized is that, I don't know, I do think like courses and digital products obviously have like a great place, but I really, really like to have more of a kind of a one-to-one insight into what an author is doing, and to be able to like really look into what they've already done. And also I think the people who I was working with they had such different amounts of knowledge. It was interesting. I don't know, we had very different experiences with all of them. So anyway, I did that for a period, and then I launched it again, and it went really well. And then I started to work with small publishers, and I started to work more on that kind of in-depth work with authors, which is what I mainly do now.
What did you like learn from that experience, or what are things that you like took away that a lot of authors like dealt with within that program?
Yeah, a lot of authors just really struggle with knowing how to promote their books. I think at the time, I do think there's more information now about like different ways that you can talk about your book. At the time, it felt like there were a lot of people on Twitter who were in kind of like Twitter pods where they were promoting each other's books, which I love. That's great. But they were just sharing like, tagline, hashtag, buy now link. And that was like, if you went to their profile, that was everything. It was like they were doing that for themselves over and over and over and over and over again, or for other authors. It just felt like, they felt really salesy, which they were. Like a lot of people were being really salesy. And I can appreciate why that felt so unpleasant, because it's not actually a very nice way to receive marketing messaging, let alone to be like creating that kind of thing over and over and over again. I think like if you're a company, you can kind of get away with it a bit more, but if you're a person, you need to be more personal, I think. So yeah, a lot of it was just around like how they present themselves and talk about their book and make it more personal, but also more about like what the other person who's reading that message is going to get from it. So thinking about the audience and like what they're actually going to get from the book.
I would say I've had a lot of similar conversations with authors in that regard, where they want to promote the book, but they also don't want to come off too salesy. So they're just in this state where they don't do anything at all because
they just freeze, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a hurdle of like, how do you overcome that battle? So I was just curious, like, what are simple things that authors can do to promote their books without it coming off too salesy?
Yeah, and I think so. It depends on kind of if you're nonfiction or fiction. So I think for nonfiction, I think in a way it's kind of a little bit easier, because you think about, what is the thing that your book is going to help people do, and just help people do that. Like make your content help people do that. And I know that's something that you can help authors with, taking the content that's in their book and turning it into useful social media content. I would say to people that like, even if you were to tweet out every line of the book, which no one's going to do, but even if you were to do that, like people don't consume information in that way. They're never going to read a whole book's content in that way. So you're still leaving them with a reason to buy the book, because it's a totally different way of consuming information. I think just pulling out what the lessons are and thinking about like, what are the things that you can help people with on like in a quick way. Like if someone is scrolling their phone and they see you, like what can you help them with within a few minutes of like them looking at your posts and in your area. On the fiction side, I think it's just pulling out like, what is the hook of the book, like what's different about it, pulling out quotes from the book that like get a sense of the feeling. If you think about, if you're writing in romance or in crime or horror or whatever, like those books all convey a different emotion when you're reading them. So it's kind of trying to get that emotion out using the content of the book itself, or using like, I don't know, just using like your knowledge of that area. So, if you write in romance, chances are you love reading romance. So like talking about other romance books, like just kind of, there's so many different things that you can pull out without just being like, hey, buy my book all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree, because I know for fiction books, I realize it's probably like the experience. You're creating an experience for whoever reads it, of
Mm-hmm.
how they might feel coming
Yes.
after the book. And then I think also another thing, what I've realized is like trying to find something similar, or maybe finding some books that are similar, some movies that are the similar vibes, so then they have something to connect it to. Otherwise they're just living in like something that's abstract.
Yeah.
And there's so many different types of books or anything like that, where it's like, okay, how does my book differ from everyone else, and what makes a reader want to read my book?
Yeah, and I think it's really useful to position yourself alongside other books. So obviously, like what is different about your book, but also what's the same. So, is it that it's like a really literary read that's going to like pull you into, some world from the 1930s or whatever? Or is it, and then what are the kind of other books or authors that you feel do that same thing? And then, yeah, I think having a set of comp authors that you can say, if you like this, you'll love this. Maybe not exactly in that way, but just to kind of position your book alongside theirs, I think is really useful.
So I just wanted to change it up a little bit. I wanted to focus on book launches because I know there's many authors want to do it or need to do a book launch, but they may not know like, the timeline or the different steps to get them started. So I was just curious, what is the basic timeline of a book launch?
It kind of depends. I mean, if you're in-house, if you're being published by a traditional publisher, you will sometimes see that their books go up for pre-order even a year, 18 months in advance. Sometimes even like as soon as, so for example, if you've already got one book out and your next book is coming, it might even be like for the paperback of that first book, the second book will be available for pre-order. So anybody who finishes the first book and enjoys it can immediately go and pre-order the second book. I think that's great. Obviously, like the campaign hasn't necessarily started, but the length of time that you're thinking about is very, very long. I do think people should give themselves more time than they think for a launch. So I will often get people contact me saying that they want help with marketing and their book is out like next week. It's not enough time to build a launch. It's
Right.
you could like have a fake launch in a month and you can make all the excitement around then. And obviously you can promote your book for as long as you want to. But I would generally say like if you can give yourself more time, like a couple of months before pub, just to tease out some content to start talking about it, to start kind of positioning it. I think it's just really useful to have that information going out there, that kind of teaser information, just to kind of get people excited for it, or just to build a little bit of awareness. So when you launch it, there is a bit of excitement and it's not just kind of coming out of nowhere.
Right. I would say, yeah, I agree because I know a lot of people want to get their books out there as soon as they write it or they're just like
Exactly. Yeah.
antsy, but I think it's not saying that you can't just launch a book. It's more of you need to have people know that you exist or they have to know that your book exists and it takes a while for it to build. And
Yeah.
so if you want to launch it within a week, there's only a certain amount of people who will know about it. And how much you prepare or how much you anticipate will have a better impact on the growth of your launch.
Definitely. And there are also other things like, things like book reviews, like building book reviews can take a long time because people need time to actually read the book. And you really want to have some reviews around that first week of publication. So you need to give people time in advance of publication to read it, like a street team or, something like using NetGalley, like getting some early reviewers in, or blog tour, whatever it is. And then also there's things like if you wanted to approach bloggers or Substackers or podcast hosts about appearing on their podcast or publication, like that all needs to be coordinated in advance. And ideally you want that to kind of happen in that launch period. You just need to think about it. I think a couple of months is great, if not a little bit longer. Yeah.
So I was just curious if someone was doing this for the first time for like a launch, or because I know that when it comes to a book, I've often heard this take that you need a platform or you need to have social media. When it comes to like nonfiction or fiction, how important is social media when it comes to a book launch?
It kind of depends on what other things you've got going on, really. I mean, I think social media is a great way to connect with people. And I do see that people do sell books via social media. So, if you have a lot of people and there are people who are going to love your book and you're sharing on social media, like that's a great way to reach those people. It's also a good way, I think it doesn't necessarily need to be your own platform. If you're connected with other people who have the right kind of people following them, working with other people on that with their platform can be a really useful way to launch a book. Also, I think there are so many other ways that you can promote a book. So, for example, you could do a podcast tour, and that's going out to like lots of other people's platforms. If you have a budget, you can look at advertising. So that's skipping the whole author platform thing altogether. I think there are lots of different ways of approaching it, but I do think that it's not an easy way to do it because you have to spend a lot of time, but it's free and it can be quite fun. And I think that it also it's very low stakes. Like you're not spending a whole bunch of money on something and then it not necessarily pan out. I think it's useful, and I think the more you can grow your audience with people who like your writing and are the kind of person who would enjoy your book, the easier things will be on, like, in the long term. I think in terms of like what a platform is, like, social media is obviously great, but I do think like newsletters are super important. A lot of authors neglect theirs, and I don't want them to. I want them to build that newsletter. And I think we're starting to see more people take that seriously with the decline of X, because that was like, Twitter was such a huge platform for writers for so long. And now, like, it's crickets there in terms of like what the kind of engagement that people are getting. And Instagram as well. You know, people were building up all these platforms, all these followers, but then like you're seeing like 2% of people are seeing posts, you know, so it's kind of, now I think people are really understanding why a newsletter is important, because actually that does go out to everybody. At least if they have the chance to see it. They might not open it, but at least they have the chance to. Whereas on Twitter and Instagram, they're not even getting shown stuff.
Right, because there's no algorithm on a newsletter. It's really determined on the person who subscribes, because they're willingly subscribing to that newsletter.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe they won't open it, but at least it'll be in their inbox, and they'll see it and they'll delete it.
Yeah.
At least they have the choice to choose to delete it.
I was, again, because I know that like newsletters are definitely undervalued when it comes to a launch or anything with promoting a book. Is there anything that's overlooked or undervalued that people are just not looking to do?
I think, again, with newsletters, I think a lot of authors, they might send a monthly newsletter, or even like a quarterly newsletter, which is not often enough. So please make it monthly if you can. But then they feel like they're not allowed to send it more often, even if it's a launch period. And I think what I would say is that really a misconception, that like, if you say you're going to send it monthly, you can only ever send it monthly. I think if you're going to, during a launch period, send it every week or even like a couple of times a week, I'd really encourage people to do that, because there's so many different ways that you can talk about a book. And as I said, like, maybe someone gets an email on a Monday and they're like, oh my God, I've got too much to do, I just can't read anything, I'm going to delete it. But then later on in the week, if you send another email, they're like, oh, actually I have a bit of time now, I could sit and read that. So it's kind of, you're reaching people at different points if you give yourself the opportunity to email them a few different times. I think just don't get, like, it's great to have like a schedule where you send something once a month, but you shouldn't get too fixed on that. If you want to send things a little bit more often, please do.
I think it's similar to when we think of like, oh, we're doing the work, but we don't realize or aware of how consistent you have to be in order to know to see the value in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to like content creation, there's just so many people telling us so many different things that we just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and again, you get into that kind of freeze mentality where you're like, oh, I don't want to get it wrong, so I just won't do anything, which is just not helpful.
Right. I know that Amazon is a huge platform that specifically for indie authors that they use. What are the top things that, if someone was planning on doing it themselves, like creating or publishing the book themselves, what are the top things that they need to create when it comes to publishing a book on Amazon?
I think really hire somebody to do the cover. I see a lot of Canva covers, and some of them are fine, some of them are not fine. And I really think that it's worth spending the money to hire a book designer, because the cover is really, really, really important. It will, when you're looking for something on Amazon and you're scrolling on the side and you see, you know, all of those tiny little covers this big, your cover really needs to look professional. You need to be able to read it. You need to be able to like tell what kind of genre it's in, what kind of book it is, what you're going to get out of it. Like, all of those things need to be immediately, like in seconds, visible on the cover. So I really think it's like a tool. It's a thing that people, because it can be quite expensive to get them designed, I think it's a thing that people undervalue, but it's super, super important. The other thing is to really think about what people are searching for and use that to influence the copy that you write for the book. So think about what people are going to be looking for. For nonfiction, it's like, what is the thing that you're helping people do? There's actually a really good tool called it's called Publisher Rocket, and that's great for finding the keywords that are searched for, but maybe not so competitive. So that, for example, romance is going to be hugely searched for, but there's going to be 50,000 other books or more that have that in their description. So it's kind of like helping you to find the more niche keywords that you can use in your copy that are still being searched for, but aren't being used by like every other book on there. And then, so it's kind of thinking about your what people are looking for and putting that into the copy, and then also looking at the categories that you're putting the book into and trying to be competitive within the categories. So I know there's kind of like a debate about whether being an Amazon bestseller matters, because like you can go into a very, very, very niche category and then you can get to be within the top 10 of that category with just maybe like 20 sales. It's not necessarily about like the credentials of being a bestseller in that category. What it is that if you get to, number one, top 3 in that category, Amazon starts to give the book a bit more momentum, a bit more marketing. And so that is like really helpful for the book kind of in the longer term. So it's kind of thinking about like the back end of the Amazon setup is actually more important than maybe people think it is.
Yeah, so it's like helping by being able to have the right keywords and being able to put yourself in a category where you're able to promote your services, because if Amazon puts you as the bestseller and you're able to outperform in that specific niche market, then it promotes the book for you, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Amazon's quite a black box. We don't know anything about what it does or anything like that, but that seems to be the case, that if you get into the best-selling chart, then they do give it a bit more. They might send an email about it. They might, move it up the search results. It just seems to make a big difference. So it's worth thinking about.
It definitely makes sense to do that, because it's just finding different ways to get your audience in front of your book.
And I also think on the keyword side, if you really, really like think about what people are searching for, and then you put that into, so there's a place for keywords within the Amazon setup, but if you also add it into the description, then you're telling those people who are searching for that, this is a book for you, because, I'm telling you, like, inside of this book is the thing that you're searching for with this keyword. So I think it's useful to think about from that perspective as well, that it's like really giving that person useful information that is going to make them more likely to want to buy the book.
Yeah, it's like this is like a lot of great information, because I think setting up Amazon's account and knowing all those things is such a tedious process that a lot of people may not consider, or I think it's kind of the last thing on their minds when it comes to everything else.
It's like it's not a very exciting part of the book process, really. So yeah, compared to like writing the book and then people buying the book, it's kind of like the ugly bit in the middle. The other thing I would say on the Amazon page is to, when you set up the book, there's like a marketing section on Amazon where you can add in A+ content. And that is essentially, it's called From the Publisher, but it lets you put up extra visuals or comparison charts, and definitely make use of that, because if you just think about the way people consume information, like when they're buying something, some people will read a description, but some people will actually just look at like the pictures. So like, for example, if I was recently buying a coffee mug and I was looking on Amazon, and I never read the description for books. I might read the description, but for anything else, I never read the description. I always scroll down to that section on Amazon which has like visuals from the seller, and people do that for books as well. So that area is there for you to use. So definitely use it. Like pull out the tagline, pull out like whatever the key things are about your book, like maybe like really great reviews or some, I don't know. So the tagline, really great reviews, just making the cover look really pretty. Pull those things out and use them.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because I think it's more that a lot of like if they're doing it themselves, it's not something that they're just gonna think of ahead of time. If someone had their first launch but they like wanted to revise anything, is there anything that is there like certain aspects that they can't revise, or is there anything that they could like go back and revise?
I mean, pretty much everything on Amazon, I think pretty much everything can be reviewed and revised as and when you need to. So you can change the price, you can change the description, the categories, the keywords, and the cover, the insides, like everything you can revise all of it. I think it's easier with ebooks. If you're doing a paperback, use, I can't remember what it is. You're not like, for example, for the subtitle on a paperback, you can't revise that. You have to get them to, you have to like release it as a new edition. And I think that's the same for if you update the insides, you have to release it as a new edition, which then means you have to like email Amazon support and get them to merge it. It's just kind of a faff. But in terms of the ebook, everything is really easy to update.
So I was like, for specifically Amazon, like let's say this person just has a limited budget. What are the top important things that they need to consider?
So yeah, it's the keywords, what people are looking for. If they don't want to buy some software like every time the publisher rocket, that's fine. They can just there's some free keyword tools online that they can search out if they just look up like SEO keyword tool. It's very similar. Obviously, it won't be exact match to Amazon, but like it'll still give you a good sense of what people are searching for and some numbers. So they can do that. In terms of covers, like I think if you have a limited budget, you could maybe reach out to somebody who's just getting into the design space, who wants to build their portfolio, or using it somewhere like Fiverr. But I would really, really, really look at like what their previous work has been, just because the quality can be very mixed. Yeah, I think a lot of the Amazon stuff in particular can be done just for free. It's just about taking the time to set it up properly and not rushing through it.
I just wanted to thank you so much for being on my podcast. There's just so much information that you provided in so little amount of time. Is there anything that you wanted to promote or to say for the end of this podcast?
Yeah, just to say I have a Substack, which is at katymorwenna.substack.com, where I talk about marketing, and then I have kind of paid strand of that where you get exclusive articles, but you also get weekly office hours with me. So if you're working through your marketing or your publishing process right now, and you want to kind of reach out and ask any questions, you can just sign up for that, and then every week on a Friday, I just go through all the questions and get back to people. And yeah, that's it. Obviously, I do work with people one-to-one as well, I should say that. So if you wanted to work with somebody on your marketing on like a more in-depth basis, you can always reach out, and we can have a chat to see if we're a good fit.
Awesome. Thank you once again.
Thanks so much for having me.